Okay, I think all of us have joined. Okay, so again, a very good evening to everyone present who's joined our webinar. This is a series of internal webinars that we would be conducting for a variety of technologies, including Salesforce. I welcome you all to the to this very first one that we're doing, and we're going to keep doing it consistently. We are recording this session at the moment, so for all the people who need notes or need to revise and revisit any of the sessions or screens that we'll be taking care of in this webinar, you can do so from our YouTube account. As I said, Ranoses is more about promoting and encouraging internal Salesforce, development and practice development, which is it is a very integral part that of our tech stacks, that we promote knowledge sharing and we help each of our peers to better themselves, which is why we have come up with this series of internal webinars where a variety of our analysts, our developers would be taking the stage, and they would be sharing their insights, their knowledge about their experience or any practical demonstration that they have recently concluded. Today, I have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Kavita Saini to this webinar, which is all about Salesforce integration with NetSuite. While most of us already know who Kavita is, I am just going to, brief a bit about her to everyone else. She has been with Ranoses for more than 7 years and is currently working as a system analyst with us. As an active member of the Salesforce community, Kavita is currently 5x Salesforce certified. She has earned 8x super badges. She's a trailhead ranger, and she's a highly decorated recipient of several quarterly DU awards. Currently, she is focusing on Salesforce B2B domain. And I welcome Kavita, and thank you so much for taking out the time to share your knowledge with all of us. Kavita, over to you now.
Hi Anushka, thank you so much for such an overwhelming introduction. I hope I am audible to everyone. All right. So, hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Thanks for spending your much valuable time to be present here and attending this webinar. As Anushka said, we have started a webinar series on integrations, and today is the first webinar of this series. So let me quickly share my screen and please confirm once you can see the screen. Can anybody unmute himself or herself to tell me, because I am on the screen so I cannot see the Zoom
Kavita,
window.
Yes, Kavita, we all can see your screen.
Okay, great. All right. So as Anushka told, today's webinar is about Salesforce integration with NetSuite. My introduction is almost covered by Anushka already. Just in case you wanted to connect with me on LinkedIn, my LinkedIn handle is Kavita Saini 89372783. You can also connect me with on Twitter. My Twitter handle is at Kavita Saini 23, and my Trailblazer profile is available at Kavita Saini 94. So without much ado, let's quickly jump on to today's topic of discussion, which is integration. We didn't realize, but we are surrounded with n number of integrations. To understand in layman's term, you all watch TV at your home. As you press volume up button on the remote, the volume of your television set turns high. As you press volume down button on the remote, the volume of your television set turns low. Now, television set and remote are two separate bodies. They are not physically connected with each other, but still something is happening in the television set on an action from remote. This all becomes possible with the power of integration. Remote is sending its request to raise up the volume in the form of infrared rays, and the infrared receiver at the television end receives that signal, interprets it, and performs the action based on the input it has received. Let's take another example. You all do online shopping. You add your desired products in the cart being on the shopping website. And once you click the checkout button, you are redirected to an entirely new website, which is the online net banking website. You make your payment there, and once you click the pay button, you are redirected back to the shopping website and receive your order confirmation there. So see, you are making the payment on a different website, but you are receiving the order confirmation on a different website. So this is all because of integration. So in general terms, we can say that two systems communicating with each other, exchanging some data or information is integration. Let's talk a bit about types of integration. There are three basic types. When we are talking about integration, we are essentially talking about connecting systems together. In Salesforce, we are talking about connecting systems to Salesforce. And this connection can be inbound, meaning we are bringing information into Salesforce. It can be outbound, meaning we are pushing information from Salesforce to another system, or it could be bidirectional, meaning messages coming in and going out to and from Salesforce. So we can define integration in Salesforce as the process of merging the data and functionality of Salesforce with another application to provide users with a single unified experience. Now, there are two concepts which are very important to understand before you can learn integration. And that is when to create an API and when to do a call out. API is nothing but an application programmable interface through which two systems communicate with each other. So the concept says that when system A wants to connect with system B, the API should be present in system B and system A has to call out that API. Similarly, when system B wants to connect with system A, the API should be present in system A and system B has to call out that API. So we can say that the API should always be present at the to side. So here, when we are communicating from system A to system B, the API should be at the to side, which is system B. And when we are communicating from system B to system A, the API should be at the to side, which is system A. I hope this concept is clear to you guys. To proceed further, let's take an example of Salesforce to NetSuite integration. We have encountered this scenario in one of our projects. So the use case was the orders created in Salesforce are to be synced with NetSuite. NetSuite is a cloud-based ERP system which provides software and services to manage business finances, operations, and customer relations. In our case, we were using NetSuite for the billing and invoicing purpose. To understand the use case in more detail, let's refer to this flow diagram. I'm sure you all are aware of opportunities in Salesforce. Any ongoing deal in Salesforce is known as opportunity. So in our case, the opportunities are getting created in Salesforce. Quotations are generated from opportunity, which are sent for approval to the customers. And once a customer approves a quotation, it is converted into an order. And this order needs to be synced with NetSuite so that the invoicing and billing can be done at NetSuite end. So now here if we see Salesforce wants to send orders to NetSuite. It means Salesforce wants to connect with NetSuite. So Salesforce is at the from side and NetSuite is at the to side. So based on our concept, the API should be present in NetSuite and Salesforce has to call out that API. So what we did, we have created a trigger on the order object. And from that trigger, we have made a call out to NetSuite by using a future method. I'm sure you all are aware that we cannot make a call out directly from trigger as it's an asynchronous process which can halt the execution of trigger. So we need to make it as a future method. So this was the complete flow we were following in our project. Now the question comes, can Salesforce call willy-nilly any third-party website? Of course not. Security is top-notch at Salesforce. We can't have code calling out to any endpoint without prior approval. So anytime we make a call out to an external site, we want to make sure that it is authorized. Yes, authorized, you heard it right. So what do we need to do in order to authorize an endpoint URL in order to make a call out? Any guesses from the audience? You can quickly unmute yourself and tell me the answer if anybody is aware of that. I'll wait for some more time. Has anybody responded, Anushka? I cannot see the Zoom screen right now.
Yeah, Kavita, a few people are responding.
So what was the answer?
Let me see. Remote site settings, auth provider, named credentials, set an endpoint, remote site setting is the popular opinion.
All right, so yeah, that's absolutely correct. So we need to add the endpoint URL in the remote site settings. And once we add our endpoint URL in remote site settings, it becomes authorized to be called out. Now, many people confuse between the concept of authentication and authorization. So the first thing to understand here is these two are distinct concepts. Let's understand this by taking an example of checking into a hotel. As you check in into a hotel, the first thing you do at the front desk is to provide your identity card. This identity could be your driving license, your passport, or any other identity. The reason it identifies you because someone with the authority has given you this identification, like the state government or the federal government. This identification basically says that the customer trying to check in is actually who he or she claims to be. So this is called authentication, which is about identity. Now, once you check in into a hotel, the very next thing happens is you get a key pass. And this is authorization because your key pass has permissions with it. With the help of your key pass, you can access your room in the hotel as well as some other areas of the hotel like fitness center, for example. So this is the difference between authentication and authorization. Authentication is all about identity, whereas authorization is all about permissions. In other words, authentication is all about who you are and authorization is all about what you can do. All right, so we have convinced Salesforce to call the NetSuite endpoint URL. But what about NetSuite? Obviously, NetSuite also takes security seriously. How it can allow any third-party website to call its URL and access its resources? Of course not. There has to be some mechanism at the NetSuite end to consider the incoming request as an authenticated request. So what NetSuite says, provide me with the consumer key and consumer secret that I have shared with you well in advance. On receiving that consumer key and consumer secret, I'll consider you as a valid requester and allow you to access my resources. So now here consumer key and consumer secret are serving the same purpose which the identity card is serving during the time of hotel check-in, which is for the authentication purpose. So if we try to summarize in a nutshell, what are the steps to call a NetSuite API? So first we need to add a NetSuite endpoint URL under remote site settings, get a consumer key and consumer secret from NetSuite and store it in custom settings, or maybe name credentials, which is a better and more secure approach. Name credential is nothing but it defines the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameters in one definition. So as in remote site setting, we were registering only the URL, but in name credential, we register the URL as well as the consumer key and consumer secret, which are the authentication parameters. Lastly, we need to use the HTTP class to send a request to NetSuite using standard protocols such as OAuth. So this is a sample code to show how to make a call out in Salesforce. I'll quickly walk you through this code. First of all, we need to create an object of HTTP request class. HTTP request class is responsible to hold the data which will be sent to NetSuite as a part of a request. So first we set our endpoint in the request object. This endpoint is basically the API URL which is exposed by NetSuite. Then we set our method, whether we want to call this endpoint URL as a get method or post method. With the help of consumer key and consumer secret, we create an authorization header. And we set this authorization header under authorization key in the header. So, and lastly, we need to create an instance of HTTP class and use its send method to send the request to NetSuite. So this is just a sample code to show you how to make a call out in Salesforce. The actual code might require some additional logic to create the authorization header, but the basic structure to make the call out remains the same. So this was one scenario where Salesforce wants to send some data to NetSuite. In another scenario, NetSuite wants to send some data to Salesforce. As I told earlier, we were using NetSuite for the billing and invoicing purpose. So as soon as the order gets synced with NetSuite, NetSuite has to create the invoices and sync those invoices with Salesforce in the order object. So just to make it a bit clear, order object is related to invoices with a one-to-many relationship, which means many invoices can get attached to a single order. So coming back to the concept which we have learned in the previous slide, here NetSuite wants to send some data to Salesforce, which means NetSuite is at the from side and Salesforce is at the to side, which means the API should be present in Salesforce. So all we need to do is we need to create an API in Salesforce and expose the endpoint URL and share it with NetSuite so that NetSuite can call that URL and send its data on that URL. Now, if you remember, when we were calling NetSuite API, we needed a consumer key and consumer secret, which NetSuite has provided to us. So now when NetSuite is trying to call our API, it would definitely require a consumer key and consumer secret, which we need to provide to NetSuite. So any guesses from where we will get this consumer key and consumer secret? Anushka, please let me know if anybody respond in the chat.
Sure. Well, it's connected app. Everybody's saying connected app.
Yeah, great. Absolutely right. So we need to create a connected app in Salesforce, which will give us the consumer key and consumer secret. So what is connected app? Connected app is a framework that enables an external application to integrate with Salesforce using APIs and standard protocols such as SAML, OAuth, and OpenID Connect. These all are basically authentication or authorization mechanism that allows a user to grant a third-party website access to users' protected resources without necessarily revealing their long-term credentials or even their identity. So these two things, consumer key and consumer secret, we get from the connected app, or we can say client ID and client secret. These two names are used interchangeably. We get these things from the connected app and we need to share these with the NetSuite. So whenever NetSuite will call our API, they need to pass this consumer key and consumer secret to us. And on receiving this consumer key and consumer secret, we'll consider their request as an authenticated request and allow them to access our resources. So lastly, to see what are the steps to create an API or web service in Salesforce, first we need to create a connected app in Salesforce. We need to get the consumer key and consumer secret from the connected app and share it with NetSuite. Lastly, to create an API, we need to expose an Apex class with REST resource annotation. Make sure to mark this class as global because since it will be called out from outside Salesforce, so the scope should be global. Along with the REST resource annotation, we define a URL mapping parameter, which basically defines the endpoint URL which we are exposing, which NetSuite will call and send its data to. After defining the class structure, we need to define methods in the class and add the annotations to them to expose them as get or post methods. The annotations used for this purpose is for get, it is at HTTP get. For post, it is at HTTP post. And similarly for put, patch, and delete. So a REST resource class can have a single method of each kind. So this is how we define an API or expose an Apex class as a REST resource in Salesforce. So up till here, we have discussed the process of integrating Salesforce and NetSuite bidirectionally. Now let's discuss the benefits that an organization can derive from this integration. So the very first benefit that organizations can derive from this integration is better alignment and productivity. For businesses to thrive, alignment within an organization is crucial. Finance and sales team need to establish an effective alignment when it comes to their processes or forecasts. For example, sales team may want to access the status of invoices in Salesforce in order to make informed decisions about opportunities or accounts. If this data is readily available in Salesforce, sales team can instantly save time by accessing the data themselves and without needing access to NetSuite or asking the finance team. Similarly, finance team can reduce the number of times the sales team emails them asking for updates on invoices and sales order. So by integrating Salesforce and NetSuite, we can ultimately refine the process so that it is conducive to both the teams. Another benefit of this integration is data accuracy. Reliable data is critical to making strategic business pivots in business strategy. When we look at accounts and finances, the data accuracy is of great importance. Businesses should be able to trust the numbers that are being recorded within NetSuite or Salesforce. When the data in the two key systems do not match, it is hard to know which tool is accurate or if either is accurate. According to a report, 41% of inaccurate data is down to human errors, which is not surprising if businesses are still using manual processes. So by removing the manual data entry and integrating accounting software with Salesforce, businesses can ensure that data is reliable across the board. One last benefit that we're going to discuss today that organizations can derive from this integration is complete financial visibility in Salesforce with reports and dashboards. Salesforce has strong native reporting capabilities, allowing users to create reports and dashboards on data that can provide valuable and real-time insights. By connecting accounting software with Salesforce, teams are able to create reports and dashboards using financial data from NetSuite. According to a report, 82% of people are still using Excel spreadsheets to work out their finances. Not only does this take a significant amount of time, but it is highly likely that there will be human errors in that process. So by integrating Salesforce and NetSuite, we can improve the productivity as well as gain some real useful reporting capabilities. So this was the last topic I wanted to cover in this webinar, but we will not end our webinar here. I'll quickly walk you through all the terminologies that we have discussed in today's webinar and where you can find all those in our Salesforce org. So I have logged in a Salesforce org for demo purpose. And the first thing we have discussed in the webinar is remote site setting. So the remote site setting you can find under setup. All you need to do is search for the remote site setting in quick find box and you will find it under security. To understand this, let's take an example of an existing remote site setting. So here we have created a remote site setting for the exchange rate API. So here the use case was we needed to call out the exchange rate API to get the current currency exchange rates. So as we know, to make a call out to any external system, we need to first register it in the remote site settings. So we have created a remote site setting with the name exchange rate and added our base URL of the API under remote site URL. So once it is added here, this particular URL will become authorized to be called out from Salesforce. Next thing we discussed in today's webinar is named credentials. You can find the name credentials under setup itself. So let's take an example of this Google Calendar named credential. So here the use case was we needed to schedule interviews in Google Calendar using the Google Calendar APIs. So for that, we need to either register the URL in the remote site setting, or a better option is to create a name credential for that. So what we did, we created a name credential for this, and we have added our API URL in the name credential. Along with that, we have defined our authentication parameters in the same name credential definition. So if I click on this authentication provider, I can see the consumer key and consumer secret here. So these two, consumer key and consumer secret, whenever any third-party system will call any third-party system, we need to pass this consumer key and consumer secret to them so that they will consider our request as a valid request. Next thing we discussed in the webinar is connected app. For that, you need to navigate to the app manager. Here you will find an option to create a new connected app. For time being, let's look into an existing connected app to see what it offers to us. Let's go to one of the connected app. I'm looking for Environment Hub. Just give me a second. All right, so here it is, the Environment Hub connected app. If I click on the view button to see the details, you can see we can find the consumer key and consumer secret details here. So these consumer key and consumer secret, basically whenever any third party system will call our API, they need to pass this consumer key and consumer secret to us. Based on this, we will consider them as a valid requester and allow them to access our resources. So these are the terminologies we have discussed in today's webinar. Before winding up the webinar, we'll do a short knowledge test to check how well you all have been able to grasp the concepts of today's webinar. So I've created a short questionnaire for you guys. So let's start the quiz. So the first knowledge check question is, what specifies the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameters in one definition? Your options are A, remote site setting, B, named credential, C, HTTP request, and D, named setting. Anushka, please let me know if anybody is responding in the chat.
Everyone is answering A, remote site setting.
All right. Any other?
Well, few people are answering B as well, named credential. Now we have C as well, HTTP request.
So you have seen C option as well.
Yeah, I've seen C option. One person, Abhishek, is saying C, HTTP request.
All right. Okay, so fair enough responses from you guys. Let's see what is the correct answer. So the correct answer is B, named credential. So as I defined earlier as well, named credentials specifies the URL of a callout endpoint and its required authentication parameters in one definition. The next question for you guys is, what annotation is used to expose an Apex class as REST resource? And your options are at HTTP GET, at web service, at REST resource, or at URL mapping.
So we have a majority of C and D as answers, REST resource and URL mapping.
All right. So let's see what is the correct answer. So C is the correct answer, which is REST resource. REST resource annotation is used to expose an Apex class as REST resource. URL mapping is the parameter we define with the REST resource annotation to define the URL of the endpoint URL of our API. So that's a short knowledge check I wanted to do with you guys to check how well you have taken the concepts of today's webinar. So now I'm opening the mic for Q&A. If anybody has any question, you can ask me.
If any of you have any questions, you can type in at the chat section or the Q&A section.
Any questions so far, Anushka?
No, nobody's asking any questions, which means that this was quite an insightful webinar for everyone. I think everyone has understood it pretty well. Okay, so we have one question from Pavan Kumar Sharma. He is asking how the NetSuite resolving the human errors.
How NetSuite is resolving the
human errors, human-made errors.
So it is basically at the NetSuite end. So like we haven't worked with NetSuite. So I cannot tell you the exact what process they follow to resolve the human errors. But first I wanted to know from you, like what human errors you are actually talking about. Which type of human errors?
Typing errors.
So why NetSuite has to handle all these errors? At which point of time they need to handle all these errors?
Pavan, I have unmuted you. You can ask the question yourself. Hi, Pavan. Are you saying something?
Yeah, am I audible?
Yeah, you are. Thank you so much.
Yeah, actually, NetSuite is an billing software or invoice software. So
Mhm.
we are passing the order entity there, but
Yes.
there is some price issue or something else from our order entity. So
Mhm.
will the NetSuite will manage it, or it will record according to our data?
So definitely NetSuite will record according to our data as far as the data we have sent is of correct data type. So like if they're expecting a number in the price, then definitely it should be a number that we are sending. If we are sending a string to them, they will definitely throw an error. So it will be their mechanism at their end, how they deal with such errors and how they respond to such errors.
Okay, okay. They are handling like that we handle at our end. There is no other mechanism.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm not sure about the exact mechanism as I personally haven't worked on NetSuite, but whatever I have learned during this integration is they check for the data type things. If the data type is correct, they will allow the value to come inside their system and consider it as a valid value. If it is the data type is incorrect, then they return the value to us to the they return error to us that it is an invalid type or anything like that.
okay. Yeah, that's okay. No issue.
All right. Any other query,
Okay.
Anushka?
Yeah, we have a question from Rajat. Is there any change that the future API call does not succeed or there is any unexpected execution error? If it does, then how is it resolved?
So since it's a future call, we do not get the response at the same time, right? So we have this mechanism in Salesforce to set the time that if whenever the response will come to us, we can attend that response in Salesforce. And exactly what are you asking? Can you unmute the person, Anushka? He can ask himself.
Yes, sure. Hi, Rajat. Could you please ask a question?
Hello.
Hi, Rajat.
Yeah, hi Kavita. So my question is, suppose when we make the call, the API call, if it doesn't get succeed, like there's some sort of error, maybe like any sort of error we can like
Mhm.
consider. So will that affect the like synchronization process?
No, since it will be a future call, so it will be handling in a exactly separate transaction. So it will not affect our synchronous call because it is working out in a separate transaction. So whatever delay or whatever error is there, it will be in the separate transaction. It will not halt or do anything with our synchronous transaction.
No, the point is like suppose we have 5 orders and
Mhm.
we are making a call, and if those 5 orders like didn't got updated in our NetSuite, so
Mhm.
will there be another call, like the system will make another automatic call to update those records, or like we have to manually do something, some other
No,
actions?
no, we have this mechanism. We can create this mechanism in our system that whenever we are making a future call out and that call out is returning any error, we can just redo the call out again in the same request. So this can be done, managed at our end as well.
Okay. Okay, Kavita.
All right.
Hi, do anyone of you have any other questions? Okay, so I am going to take that as a no. Thank you so much, Kavita, for your time and for such a thought-provoking webinar. I am very sure that all of us has learned a thing or two. Thank you to all the attendees for taking out the time and joining us over here. I would, signing off from this webinar, and we would meet shortly, very soon, on our next integration webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day ahead.